Good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to see we have such a rambunctious crowd here today. Thank you very much for your attendance. I know it's on a Friday. A lot of you have jobs that you're not attending to, and I'm pleased that you're all here to be with us for our 2018 AGM of the College of Dental Surgeons. My name is Don Anderson. I am the college president and board chair, and I will remain as college president and board chair for another 14 days, 8 hours, 30 minutes, and 16 seconds.
Maybe.
I'd like to confirm that we have a quorum. We require at least 10 registrants to be part of the quorum. And so we are good with that respect. I'll introduce the head table to you, and on my far left is acting registrar Dr. Chris Hacker, and then our treasurer, Dr. Patricia Hunter. Dr. Susan Chow is late this morning, but she should be here shortly. And on my right is our parliamentarian, Ellie Mina. Thank you, Larry. Who is not here currently at this moment is our external legal counsel, who is Mr. Peter Gall, and he will be arriving at around 9:15. And Peter Gall is the lawyer that the board hired to deal with the Staples-Marburg issue, and he's going to be here specifically to speak to that Staples-Marburg issue. And that'll be at the end of the question period. So there will be a question period at the end relative to us being able to respond to your questions regarding the reports that we're going to give you today. As a separate item, Peter Gall is going to be available to give you a history and a rationale for what happened with the Marburg Staples issue, and we'll answer questions to that as well. So when it comes to the question period, if you can please define that, draw a line and say, okay, I want to ask questions relative to the reports given, and then there will be a period at the end where Mr. Gall will respond to your questions. A little housekeeping item, if you can please turn off your devices or put them on silent, that would be great. This is filmed today. We have a camera here, and we are webcasting this meeting. And this webcast will be available later on the college website. We have a total of 15 individuals online, and I welcome you all as well. Those joining us via webcast are invited to submit questions by email to be read aloud during the question period as time allows. However, only registrants who are in the room with us can vote on motions before us. And so to begin the process that we'll go through at the AGM, the first item is adoption of the agenda. And I will invite a motion that the agenda of the 15th of June 2018 AGM be adopted. I need a mover and a seconder. So Doug Kahn moves and Ash Varma seconds. Is there any discussion regarding the agenda? If not, I will call the question. Those in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Those opposed, motion passed. Thank you very much. Rules of order, which you should have on your enclosure. I will ask Ellie Mina to speak to the rules of order.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. It's nice to be back with you. Just to explain my role as a parliamentarian at the meeting, it is strictly procedural. Sometimes when there are differences of opinion, there may be one side and another side. People will ask me, which side are you on? And I say, none of those. I am on the side of the process. I'm here to look after the procedure for the meeting. And the process is governed by 3 documents that I'm sure you're aware of. The HPA, or the Health Professions Act, that's a legislation that applies to you. The bylaws of the college, and then in the bylaws it refers to the Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure. It's by Alice Sturgis. That's the book. So let me just cover a couple of them. Under the bylaws, as your president said, quorum is 10 registrants, and we have well over that. Bylaws require a 21-day notice for the annual meeting, and that has been complied with. And then the bylaws also talk about bringing forward non-binding motions by the registrants for at least 45 days prior to the annual meeting, and none has been submitted, and therefore there won't be an ability to present motions, resolutions by the registrants. The rules of order, so I assisted in preparing that page, and I need to explain the key, the intent behind it. The debate or any participation by you will occur under agenda item number 8, which is the questions on reports. So it will be, as your president said, questions on the report of the officers and the registrar. And there will be a presentation by Mr. Gall, and then questions specific to the settlement issue that would be at that point. So to govern that part of it, this is what the rules are intended to do. So let's just look briefly at, for example, rule number 2. Number 2 talks about who is entitled to participate at the meeting, and it requires you to, under rule number 3, to go to the microphone and identify yourself. And then once recognized by the chair, you can speak. And I would ask those who are online, I'm assuming you can hear me, please, when you send an email in, you identify your name so that whoever presents the questions on your behalf to make sure that they know who it is that they're representing. Okay, so those who are hearing me online, please do that. So that's number 3. And the order meaning that one person speaks at a time, once recognized by the chair. I believe that I will be facilitating that part of the conversation so that your president can participate in the discussion in answering questions. Under number 4, there's a statement about time limits, and I realize that there may be some sensitivity in terms of curtailing the time that you speak. I think the idea is to have as many people as possible be able to approach the microphone and share their comments or their observation or questions. And the challenge is to enable as many of you to participate while at the same time watching the clock, because I'm told that most people will be ready to leave at approximately 10 o'clock. So if we can have your support, then I will not need to have a stopwatch, although I do have a stopwatch, and I can use it if needed. If we can count on reasonableness, if you can make your questions reasonably brief and to the point, that would be most helpful. So the official time limit that's stated in the rules is 3 minutes and up to 2 times per individual. And as per rule number 5, if you want to ask to speak for the second time, you go to the end of the lineup and allow first-time speakers to speak ahead of second-time speakers. And anything relating to motions is not applicable here, but number 7 is speakers must observe decorum and must avoid personal attacks and disorderly or discourteous behaviors. I think the idea is yes, there may be differences of opinion, and yes, there may be people in the room who might be annoyed with something that occurred over the past year. But the idea is to focus the comments on the issues and not go to the place where you attack personalities. You speak about, if motions were on the floor, you talk about the motion and not the proponent of the motion. So we want to make the discussion civilized, respectful, and dignified so that you can get the questions that you want to present answered, and then move forward and get the meeting concluded at that point. That's essentially the essential rule, and I've been asked by the president to ask for a motion that the rules be approved. If someone can move it and second it, so mover. Yeah, yeah, there was someone who moved. Seconder and
Kathy?
And seconding over there.
And your name was? Arlene Kern? Okay, second.
Discussion on the rules, questions on the rules. Those in favor of the rules, raise your hands. Lower your hands. Those opposed, raise your hands. The rules have been, that's okay. The rules have been approved. So,
Larry, would you like us to note your...
Yeah. Okay, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you. The next item is approval of the minutes.
Just one more thing for those who are online. When it comes time for question periods, it takes up to a minute of delay before they receive the question. So please, if you're online, if you want to submit a question, the sooner you submit it, the better. Thank you.
The next item is on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the 23rd of the June 2017. I need a mover for that. Do I hear a mover for Ash Varma and seconder? Jeff Coyle. Hey, Jeff. Okay. Are there any corrections to the minutes of the 23rd of June 2017? If not, we will then proceed to the vote. Those in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Those opposed, the motion has passed. That the minutes of the 23rd of June 2017 be approved. Item number 7 on our agenda is the annual reports. You'll hear various reports, and we'll take questions after all of them have been presented. You have a hard copy. You should all have a hard copy of our annual report. And those of us who are in a webcast will see the materials in the section of the webcast. And I will lead off and give you my report first off. This has been a very difficult and challenging year, as most of you who are here are aware. As a health regulator, we are in a position of trust. Just as a good relationship between a dentist and a patient relies on trust, this organization requires the trust of the public, the government, the dentists, the dental therapists, and certified dental assistants we regulate. To earn your trust, it is absolutely critical that we demonstrate integrity, transparency, accountability in the fulfillment of a regulatory responsibility, namely registration, quality assurance, thank you, Ash, and complaint resolution. During my tenure, this board's focus has always been on fulfilling our mandate of public protection and working in the public interest. I can report to you that in my experience, the regulatory division of the college has a strong record, and for that I am proud. I recognize that not everyone will agree. As other regulators have noted, our most vocal critics are often two opposing viewpoints. On the one side, there is a group of registrants who feel the college is heavy-handed and seeks to meddle in their practice. On the other side, there are those members of the public who are convinced that the college operates like an old boys club and is reluctant to take action against the registrants. Both of these viewpoints are deeply held and unlikely to be moved by fact or evidence. But I want to tell you that I have spent the past 2 years getting to know this organization inside and out. I have devoted countless hours to reading our bylaws, the HPA, our governance manual, sitting on committees, asking questions, and learning everything that I could about trends and issues affecting health regulators. What I learned is that we have a strong governance framework, one that the board relies on heavily to guide our processes. Using that governance framework, we have strengthened the responsibility, the authority, and the oversight of the board. We have crafted and adopted systems for board evaluation and the registrar CEO evaluation that will help put both parties into a much higher functioning level. There are more than 100 members of the profession and members of the public working side by side on your board and at committee levels to carry out the college's legislated mandate. We have talented and professional staff, led by Acting Registrar Dr. Chris Hacker on my far left. Chris brings 6 years of experience in the regulatory division as a complaint officer first and complaint investigator first, and then taking a policy role, and then most recently as deputy registrar, which he held for 6 months. He is now our acting registrar. And the operational side of the college is currently in very good hands. Not everything has gone smoothly. Since our last board meeting in February, we experienced the resignation of a public board member and a change in leadership of our staff, our senior staff. The Minister of Health has appointed 5 additional public members to our board and commissioned Harry Caton from the UK's Professional Standards Authority to review the college and report on our effectiveness. The board welcomes these actions by government. The 5 new public board members all have senior leadership experience in the health sector. They are asking the right questions and helping the board to refocus our efforts. Mr. Caton's review is an opportunity for our college to assess our strengths and identify weaknesses so that we can more effectively fulfill our mandate. All health colleges are under increased scrutiny, and this is as it should be. Yes, we have made mistakes, and yes, there is a lot of work ahead of us. But the incoming board is ready for the task of strengthening the relationship between the college and the public and the government and the registrants and our fellow health regulators. We resolve to do better. The supports are in place to ensure that we can accomplish this. It has been my privilege to serve as your president and board chair. It is with confidence that I turn over the presidency to Dr. Peter Laub at the end of this month. Thank you. And the next report before us is Patricia Hunter doing the Treasurer's Report.
Thank you, Don. I am pleased to report that the college has continued its strong financial performance in 2017-2018. The audited financial statements are found in your annual report along with my written Treasurer's Report. Today, I would like to provide highlights of college expenditures over the last fiscal year. We are in a very good financial situation. The 2017-2018 fiscal year ended with a $503,000 surplus, and all reserve funds have remained fully funded. We have observed an upward trend in the total number of practicing dentists due to a higher than usual influx of new applicants in the last 2 years. As a result, registration, application, and incorporation related revenue has gone up, as you can see in the audited financial statements. A modest fee increase was implemented for the 2018-2019 year. This increase will safeguard our reserve funds and allow us to maintain a sound financial position going forward. The largest driver of the fee increase is related to resolution of complaint and discipline files. While it remains true that the vast majority of complaints are resolved at early stages, we know there will always be a small number of more serious cases that require the college to issue a citation and conduct a formal and discipline hearing. We have been experiencing an increase in the seriousness and complexity of cases being reported to the college, requiring additional staff resources not only for investigation, but also for ongoing monitoring files. We had anticipated 6 disciplinary cases for 2017-2018. As it stands, some cost savings were realized when 4 of these files were resolved before a hearing was held. However, the majority of the costs are related to the preparatory work and are incurred even if we are able to resolve the file prior to the hearing. We were able to recoup some of the legal costs through fines and cost assessment. The college is committed to maintaining its strong financial position in the face of these financial challenges. Our fund system, combined with strong financial reserves, mean we will remain well positioned to deal with changes in this area, such as increased numbers of complaint or increased numbers of hearings. The college is undertaking a number of proactive board-supported initiatives related to its core functions. For instance, a proposal for a revised quality assurance program to strengthen the way we build and maintain competency for our registrants. We're also updating our bylaws to reflect a clear, accurate, and concise description of the college's governance and regulatory processes. Communications activities, we're focused on registrant engagement, primarily through the listening sessions that were held around the province this year. And we continue to build our technology infrastructure and have worked to provide the online experience for both registrants and the public. And Dr. Hacker will speak more on this. Resources were also invested in the area of professional practice support via the development of 2 online courses for registrants. At this time, I would like to thank the Audit Committee, the Audit Committee and Finance and Audit Working Group continue to play an active role in the oversight, and I'd like to thank the college staff and also in particular our departed public member, Mr. Terry Hawes, who was the chair of this committee this year, for their dedication in the management of financial matters. In closing, I'd like to say that the board's commitment to its financial stewardship role is unwavering. Working with management, we strive to ensure operational efficiency and apply cost controls. We are pleased to report continued success in this area. As we move forward, the college anticipates being able to execute our core activities as well as board-supported initiatives while maintaining healthy reserves. More details can be found in your package. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Patricia. We'll now move on to item number 7.3, Acting Registrar's Report, and I will ask Dr. Chris Hacker to give that report.
Thanks very much, Don. I'd just like to echo Don's and Patricia's sentiments, and thank you all for being here. It's they're busy lives that you all lead, and we really, really appreciate you being here. As Don has indicated, I'm very new to the position. Excuse me. Monday marks the beginning of my 9th week in the chair, and I just really wanted to say thank you to everybody from staff to board and committee members to registrants and members of the public who've reached out with support and good wishes, and we hope to serve you as well as has been done in the past. A large part of the agenda for today's AGM is going to focus really on reporting out from last fiscal year. And that's a period of time that I have absolutely no involvement with and can take no credit for. So I wanted to make that statement clear. Those platitudes really go to the superb staff at the college and hardworking board and committee members who, through their dedication, keep this organization on course in fulfilling the college's mandates of public protection and always working in the best interest of the public as well. Almost 80% of the college staff time and resources goes into supporting our core functions of entry to the profession through registration, quality assurance, and complaints investigation. The college oversees over 10,000 registrants, including CDAs, dental therapists, and dentists, which makes it the 3rd largest health regulator and the 10th largest professional organization in the province, according to Business in Vancouver. Overseeing such a large registrant base requires competence, hard work, and perseverance that's on display anytime you walk up onto the 5th floor of the college building. This past year really saw a dedicated effort, as Don has alluded to already, to really try to increase transparency, trust, excuse me, accessibility, and stakeholder engagement in all of the college's core function and in its policy development as well, too. And I'd like to just kind of go over a list of the things that have been accomplished in this past year. There's been a real move to create more online accessibility through completion of several projects, and Tricia alluded to those just earlier. We had moved to an online renewal system several years ago, and this year have added online registration for new registrants for the main categories of dentists and certified assistants. That's been a huge step, and Rasheen and her team can take a lot of credit for this. A new online complaint submissions option has been added to complement our existing manual submissions process and launched in March of this year. We've also added translations of basic complaints information in 7 additional languages on our website, and we do get an awful lot of patients who don't speak English well still wanting to make a complaint, and we're trying to increase that accessibility as well. When complaint files are closed, we continue to ask for feedback from both registrants and complainants alike through a managed exit survey. The results from the first year have been compiled and are available on the website should you wish. The board recently approved an extension of the agreement with the company that oversees the system for one more year. They won't be reporting out as frequently. We're trying to reduce cost on this as well, but we'll be getting 6-month reports on this that again, we'll be publishing for you. Finally, with complaints, Anita and her team worked really hard to create 5 years of anonymized complaint summaries that are now available online. The hope being that the summaries will provide insight into the types of complaints that we receive, identify and help prevent against the pitfalls that we face as dentists and CDAs every day we practice, and also to promote an overall transparency and understanding of the complaints process itself and take some of the mystery out of how they're resolved. The past year also saw development of an online consultation forum that has yet to be unveiled, but awaits the next consultation process. It will provide an online space for interested parties to share feedback and build on comments from others. You may also be aware that the college entered into a commitment to develop a more open, comprehensive policy development framework in 2016, with earlier and more frequent engagements with our stakeholders on all policy development. Consideration's been given as to how to extend that consultation beyond just registrants to members of the public as well. And we hope that this online forum may be our first step towards a more universal, real-time consultation with everyone who has an interest in how the college regulates. The past year also saw the revised policy development process lifted off the page and applied for the first time with respect to the board-approved statement regarding third-party billings generated by the Ethics Committee, and a lot of work by Ken Chow and his team and Peter Stevenson Moore at the college for getting that through. With ongoing updates to our website, we really hope that the public and registrants alike will find information regarding college projects and overall regulatory information more readily available. Sorry, guys. I think I'm overdue. I think I'm over my time. I'll be really quick. As has been mentioned in last year's AGM, the college has continued to engage registrants through listening sessions held throughout the province, usually facilitated through the hospitality and generosity of the individual component dental societies of BC. Most recently, the Quality Assurance Committee has scheduled independent presentations to allow early input regarding changes to the existing quality assurance program involving continuing ed and continuous practice. The QA committee supports staff in their efforts to fulfill the core function of promoting competence and professionalism with our registrants. In this regard, February saw the initial draft program produced by the committee approved by the board for initial and extended consultation. And you may have already been to the session on Broadway just a few weeks ago, and we've also been to Victoria's, or will be going to Victoria to reach out there as well. We've also established lasting partnerships with other health regulators through the BC Health Regulators group of colleges, and this has really been necessary in pushing out for the ongoing need for public health regulators to engage with First Nations Health Authority and our existing commitments that are summarized in our annual report. Again, as I mentioned, none of what I've discussed is anything that I can begin to take credit for, and again, I've given credit where it's due. What I can give you is my commitment to more open, transparent regulation and a promise to work with all of the above-mentioned groups to regain the trust that the public and you as registrants deserve and rightfully demand. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chris. I'll now ask Dorothy Jennings to come up and speak as the public member on our board to give a report to you all. Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you, Don, and good morning, everyone. As many of you can appreciate, the role of the public member is becoming much more complex. The business of governance and of regulation is really in the forefront, not only of the general public, but very much on the part of government. I'm one of 11 now public representatives on the College of Dental Surgeons. The role of the public member, in short, is really to provide that balance between the elected representatives on the board and the public, as Don has said, in the interest of the public and for the protection of the public. So the face of legislation, regulation, and healthcare, in healthcare, is really changing, not only for the dental college, but for all colleges. under health regulations. The Health Professions Act is an incredibly complex piece of work to have to work through, it's been my privilege as a publicly appointed board member to be part of that work, to be part of working with my colleagues, my elected dental colleagues, in making sure that we do carry out that mandate. So I'm looking forward to, I have another year and a half to continue on with the board, and I look forward to continue to do that work and advance the practice of dentistry in the province of British Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. That concludes our reports to give to you. I will now go to item number 8, which is question period, and I will ask Ellie Mina to facilitate that question period. So initially, we want the questions regarding the reports, and we want to leave the Marburg Staples issue to the end as a separate item. Thank you. Ellie? Pardon? No.
Okay.
Mr. Gall is not here yet,
Not
so.
here yet. Okay, thank you. So if you have a question to the officers at the table as well as the public representative, please line up at the microphone, and if for the time being, until Mr. Gall is here, if you can focus the questions on the reports that were presented, that will be helpful. So, floor is yours. Questions? Yeah.
Are there,
Yeah.
KK?
Okay. If you can identify yourself to start.
Okay,
with.
my name is KK1. I'm just a registrant. I heard in the reports there's emphasis on being transparent. That's what I believe too, because transparency is the cornerstone of a functioning organization or democracy. So I just want to know whether in the future there will be more transparency. For example, in the past, one of the board meeting I attend, and after about half an hour or stuff, then we were asked to leave, and everything is in camera and all kinds of things. So I think this, to me, there's so many in-camera sessions, it makes a mockery of the democracy, or the transparency. And I'm not sure whether in the future we can do something about it to cut down the number of in-camera sessions so that the public, as well as the registrant, have more chance to know firsthand, as things happen, rather than, years later, through some leak, learn out some facts, and then they get very upset about it.
Okay. Well, I will ask the President, I think, to open the discussion, and if others have a comment to make to transparency.
Thank you, KK. In fact, you're absolutely correct. When I came on as president, probably more than 90% of the board meeting was in camera. And that doesn't, to my mind, satisfy the transparency issue. As a step in the right direction, what was implemented during my presidency was the opportunity for the board to select out issues that they could take out of the in-camera session and put into the general session. I think the trend is, and the position of the board is one to agree to increase transparency. And although it won't be happening in my watch, I'm sure Dr. Peter Lobb, as the next president, will challenge this issue as well and move towards a more open and transparent process for the board. Now, we do have significant restrictions in that regard. The restrictions being that there's privacy issues, and some of the issues that we're dealing with in camera cannot be discussed openly outside of the board meeting. But I think there is a general feeling in the board members that improving the transparency in our board meetings and being more open is the direction that we want to go in. And so I will have to rely on the incoming board to follow that process. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Larry Cheevers.
John, Peter, may I have permission to read the correspondence I sent you? Do you have any problem?
Can we engage in this
Okay, well, I just
direction?
wanted to get approval from the next president, if you don't mind. It's called brown nosing. Something you wrote about? I'm not going to go through the whole letter, Don, because it's irrelevant, but I just want to read, this is an opinion, obviously. My chief concern at the college relates to the methodology and the direction of the current system of investigating. Oh, by the way, to the public members, I have been coming to these meetings for 40 years, right? I have been practicing dentistry for 52 years. I'm an old fart, and it's probably my swan song, but I want to make a couple of opinions, not statements, opinions in relationship to what's happening at the college. So my chief concern at the college relates to the methodology and direction of the current system of investigating and adjudicating public complaints. Therein, the danger is not ignorance, but the presumption of knowledge by these contracted individuals. Their involuntary attitude of their righteousness and their omnipotent infallibility prevents any discord, discussion, or written submission of contrary opinions, even those submitted by specialists in the contested area. I'm going to skip the next paragraph. I have had the honor of serving the public of British Columbia as the Chief of Forensic Dentistry for 25 years. During that time, I witnessed many of my American colleagues describe pattern injuries on the skin with scientific certainty, frequently condemning these individuals to a lifetime in prison. Fortunately, latterly, the Innocent Project has reversed many of these unscientific, biased, sometimes racist opinions. To prevent a repeat of this horrific blunder, no pattern injuries will be accepted unless an equally qualified forensic dentist independently collaborates a similar opinion. I have come to learn from this and other experiences there is no such thing as scientific certainty. There is opinion, conjecture, presumption, and a general incomplete information. I believe, unfortunately, we have a similar situation arising here in the current system of adjudicating at our college. This is not to say there are poor, unqualified, fraudulent members of my profession, and they should be and are censored by their actions. And I fully endorse this effort made by the individuals in college. But again, I reiterate, the current system is flawed, biased, and lengthy. The current system requires a totally independent devil's advocate to ensure fairness and natural justice. I am delighted to welcome the new, fresh public members, and I hope that at some time some of us can meet with a new inquiry committee so that we can actually put forward our views for the betterment of the college. Thank you.
And your question, was the question directed to anyone, or were you looking for?
Just a general question to Chris, more than anything else.
Okay.
Larry, thank you for that. You phoned me last night and said you weren't going to talk today.
Changed my mind.
Okay, so Dr. Hacker, go ahead.
Larry, thanks. I obviously I won't say much, but as we've alluded to Harry Caton's review that's coming up over the course of this year, and we can speak more to that certainly at the board meeting tomorrow. But I will say he's going to be taking a look at all of our processes, including that, and we're hoping by December we'll have a fair and honest appraisal of how we do. And I think that what the viewpoint that you expressed, we recognize is there. Don alluded to the fact that the public may see it the other way, and there are some dentists, and I think maybe you alluded to the dentists in your comments, that there are some dentists that feel we're not doing enough with some dentists as well. So we walk a fine line. We're dictated to by legislation, and then the nice thing about the Harry Caton review is if there are gaps in the legislation, you may know we were kind of retrofitted into the Health Professions Act in 2009, and that legislation was meant for smaller colleges, I think, for the most part, and not to put blame there, but this review is going to allow us the opportunity to determine if, in fact, some of the gaps in our process may be legislative in origin, and we'll have that opportunity to express that to government as well. So rest assured that we're constantly looking and trying to revise and make this as fair as we can, and comments well taken.
Sure. Are there any questions coming from the online group? No? Not yet. Anyone else? Please go to the microphone.
My name is Ben Belevi. I'm also a registrant. I just want to say I've been coming to these meetings for the last 14 years, and this is the first time I've heard Dr. Cheever sound a little nervous at the microphone. That's important. I have a few, but the most important question is I'm a guy who likes looking at numbers and trying to make sense of these numbers. And on page 11, complaints file breakdown, what I've noticed is that there's been a significant drop in open cases. And the number of total cases have dropped from 266 at 2013 to almost two-thirds, less than two-thirds. So I'd like to know why that trend occurred. And more important, just as important, is what I've noticed also in 2013, only 1% of the closed cases actually went to discipline, while in 2018, there's been almost 10% of complaints. So any way of explaining that kind of trend? Is it just kind of an anomaly, outlier, or anything like that?
I can certainly speak to that. You may notice as well, too, that the number of complaint files being closed has reduced as well. Right. And it's not unrelated that the number of discipline files increasing has resulted in the total number of complaints being closed decreasing. Tricia had mentioned briefly about the staffing issues with complaints, and some of us who were actively involved have been pulled away, and those positions haven't necessarily been replaced yet. We're working hard to do that. We've had budget. We're about to reinstate a full week of complaint investigators' time back to this. But I think, and it's always hard to know, and it's a small sample size, and we may well see, and gosh, I'm speaking to the expert in sort of systems analysis for sure, and so please let me know how I'm doing with my rudimentary analysis on this. But it may well develop, as far as the complaint cases, the files being opened, it may well represent a trend. It's hard to know. We've worked really, really hard in the last 5 or 6 years to try to get out to registrants and deal with sort of the smaller issues in a preventative way. Talking about record keeping, Larry, do you remember those? Also, just with our overall complaints process being sort of laid out, and again, I spoke to the pitfalls that we all face as dentists. Informed consent issues. You'll find that the biggest issues we face really in terms of closing issues are record keeping, informed consent, and diagnosis and treatment planning. And we've worked really, really hard to try and get the word out. So I think what we're finding is we're seeing less complaints with less important concerns attached to them, because I think we have dealt with those, but we're seeing increasing numbers of complaints with more specific treatment concerns, and that is a worry. Certainly treatments like implants, where dentists coming out of dental school are being told potentially by suppliers that these are easy to do, and they are easy to do in the right situation, but they can very quickly go wrong. And so the discipline files, I think, are representing the complexity of those treatment issues we're seeing, Ben. I think also when you see a number like 15 for last year, that represents a culmination of a process that probably started in 2013 with a registrant, and often these will get to discipline because the registrant does not want to get involved in a consensual resolution of the file, so we're kind of forced into that. Tricia also made note that of the 4 that had planned disciplinary hearings over this last year, all 4 were resolved before they got there, and I think that's a testament to the college's process. The legal counsel for the registrant who was unfortunately facing that disciplinary action is seeing that there are really no holes or openings in the armor, and they're settling before it gets to the hearing. We're confident. We have 2 more scheduled, one for the summer and one for the fall. We haven't heard back from council regarding the fall one, but we're hopeful that one will settle beforehand. The hearing in the fall is about a dentist who has really gone missing, and we may have to go to hearing on that simply because he may not respond, but we'll bring you up to date on that. So I don't know if that answers the question. Yeah.
Okay. Quick follow-up.
Yeah, very quick one. Thanks a lot that you did answer it. But one of the trends that I do see is that the number of open cases have actually dropped. And there's 2 ways, there's many ways of interpreting. One way of interpreting is that either it might reflect that the public's now more confident and trusting of us, therefore less complaints. That's the one I want to believe. It also can mean that the public has lost confidence in this process and is using other avenues like more litigation. It'd be interesting to see if the litigation towards these have gone up and make a comparison. But I just like looking at trends and trying to make sense of them. Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? And by the way, I noted that Mr. Gall is around, so if someone can bring him here, that'd be nice. He was. Yeah, is there anyone who wants to ask for the first time speakers?
My name is Mark Spitz. I was wondering if, well, I guess first of all, I'm not even 52 years old, Larry, so that is an impressive track record. And he's been coming to these meetings for 40 years and been promising for about 39 that it was his last one, but he's still here, so that's great. I was wondering, Chris or Don or anybody up there, if they would like to just explain HPRB for everybody else. I understand the process somewhat, but I think it's important to bring that up because it seems to me a process that validates the investigations that are taking place at the college and tells us that we're doing things correct.
Mark, thank you for that. The same page that Ben had opened in the annual report talks about the HPRB, which is really the Health Professions Review Board, and this is an oversight board set up by the Health Professions Act and is comprised completely of public members. And it serves two functions. One, during the course of an investigation, if either the complainant or the registrant has a concern with the time frame that which the investigation is taking place, they can appeal to the Health Profession Review Board to put a hold on the investigation while the Health Professional Review Board has a look at the reason for the time delay. We are mandated to keep registrants and complainants up to speed on the time frame of the investigation, and we do that. Usually in a third timeline letter, we will indicate to them that they do have the right to appeal to the HPRB at that point. Most don't, simply because they recognize that will delay it even further. And usually we can confirm or reassure the person potentially wanting to make that appeal where we are and give some timeframes to them. Secondly, at the end of a file, and the file being closed with a disposition from the inquiry committee, the complainant is able to appeal to the HPRB with respect to the completeness of the investigation and the fairness of the disposition as well too, which means that if they feel some part of the investigation was flawed, they weren't heard, information wasn't shared properly, they can appeal that. If they feel that the disposition, as I say, didn't reflect the concerns laid out in the complaint and determined by the inquiry committee, they can make that appeal as well. And I think, Mark, I'll thank you for the softball question because we've had tremendous success with these. And I'll give you some generalized numbers, but since the HPRB has been functioning, we've had about 175 appeals go. We've been successful in all but probably 2 to 3 of those. A couple of them were process related that we've won an appeal, and the third one was there was concern that one of the concerns expressed by the complainant had not been investigated. It was an interesting complaint submission process by this person that they made about 4 or 5 separate consecutive complaints that seemed to change in nature every time he submitted. And there was an informed consent aspect that appeared to have been lost in the investigation, but on further review it was dealt with, and so that appeal was overturned as well. So I think we're batting a tremendous success rate, and I think, again, coming back to my comments earlier about discipline, I really believe that the process that Carmel Weisman had built based on a need to be compliant with the Health Professions Act, that it's working as well as it can.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
I'm noting that Mr. Gall is in the back of the room. Is there any other questions that okay,
Yeah.
do you mind going to the microphone? So that's not connected to that issue, presumably. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you and good morning. I have a couple of simple
Your
questions.
name?
Sorry. My name is, My name is Nita Poppet. I'm a dentist. I've been part-time faculty member for the past 20-some years and on various committees. Sorry about that. 2 simple questions. In order to request a meeting with Mr. Eric Creighton, what is the process for us registrants to meet with him, number 1? Number 2, are there standards of practice being written for all disciplines of dentistry, as was promised at one time, so there is fairness and unbiased process within our complaints committee? Those 2 questions, please.
Okay.
I think I could probably take those.
Is it okay for me to sit down while
of course.
I'm sorry.
Please do, please do. Nita, thank you. I know we've spoken about this at length, some of the aspects. So I'll answer the first question that anybody who wishes to speak with Mr. Creighton, it's just a matter of getting a hold of Nancy in the registrar's office. She will put the name forward to Mr. Creighton, and he will determine whether he has the time and what the relevance of the request would be. His time is restricted. He'll be here in July, for those who don't know, for about 3 weeks with Michael, Michael Warren, who's coming from London as well. They'll be doing a deeper dive into policy and our committee work and really all aspects of the college. And as a result of that, his time is limited, although he's more than happy to speak to as many people as he can.
No. Can you go to you have to go to the microphone because people online cannot hear you.
Yep. I think the question was just a contact information.
Yes.
I believe.
Yes. Does he have an email that we can contact him? If he doesn't have time, can we send an email?
Make a submission.
With suggestions?
I don't see why not. We're due to speak with him again, Nita, fairly soon before things really start to happen. So, Nancy, maybe we can make a note of that and see what process he might want in terms of you submitting written if he can't see it personally.
Oh, and what is the model of governance that we are using presently? That's right, we talked about
Wow.
it and I forgot totally.
I'll answer your questions first, if you'd like. And I'll try to be quick with your second question about standards of care and standards of practice, and we've had this conversation many, many times. If I could suffice it to say that most regulation, certainly in the aspect of complaints, is either going to be rules or principles based. And an example of a rules-based regulation would be that it's a 50 kilometer an hour speed zone all the way home, and that's enforced. And if you break it, there's consequences to that. Principles-based would say something like, we trust you to get home on your own safely. And protect everybody else in the process. We trust that you will drive according to the conditions of the road and the weather and all of that stuff. And we're not going to hold you to a specific speed limit. But if you do have an accident and a member of the public is harmed, then we will take a look at how fast you were going on that curvy, wet road and make comment and express concern about that and possibly offer some remediation to help that person drive a little bit more carefully. And I don't mean to be trivial in that explanation, but I think it really points out the problems we have in dentistry is that if we try to set up rules-based regulation for the active practice of dentistry, it gets very difficult and it becomes very restrictive. And our goal is to entrust that all of the accredited registrants that we have the ability to provide safe, competent care, if that makes sense, and that the public is protected through that accreditation process. The complaints is the very end, and it's the reactive part of regulation. And if we could improve our entry to the profession and our quality assurance to the point where we don't have any more complaints, that's great. But of course, your concern is how do we adjudicate when it gets to there, when there's a specific aspect of care that's a concern. And really what we're hoping for is the principles of putting the patient first, always acting in their best interest, and then applying it from there. I don't want to tell you what type of implant to use. I don't want to tell you the endodontic obturation system that you need to use. The college doesn't want to be prescriptive, if that makes sense. And I know this is, we can parse the detail out for a great length of time, and I know there's a lot more important things to talk about, but I think there's been a reluctance and a reticence to give those specific standards of care or standards of practice, as they're both called, because of the restrictive nature of them. And can I leave it at that, or?
Can I was just wondering, because there have been cases where there have been 3 different specialists, one at the college, couple outside who have totally different views. So how do you guys assess that? Because it seems like the college, whoever's at the college has the right, but there may be other schools of thought. So how do you, like you said, you don't want to box us all in because we all come from various institutions with slightly different teaching.
It's a fairly anecdotal.
Okay, can I, before that, can we
sorry.
please put the microphone back? And and then we need to move to another speaker or get back to Mr. Gall.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Nita, maybe, I'm more than happy to talk to you about this, and I hope I've expressed an invitation to come and see me anytime that we want to deal with this further. And it's a detailed conversation, and I know it's one we may never be able to resolve. But as to the last comments you made, they sound a bit anecdotal to me, and I would like to think that our process is fair. And so if there are concerns, it's consensual until it's not. But it's consensual in over 90% of the files we deal with, and nobody is asked to sign any agreement that they're not ready to sign. I think that's the bottom line. And there's opportunity to talk and present to the inquiry committee as much as that registrant needs to. Wendy, close your mouth. Oh, I thought you might be. So that's as best as I can say to that, Anita, I believe. But I'm happy to carry this conversation on, and you know that. Great. Don, I don't know if you want. Yeah, I don't know if Don wants to speak to that.
Okay, when we ask a question, we need to go to the microphone. And I'm also looking at the clock, and I'm just wondering whether it's in the interest of the meeting to hear the presentation from Mr. Gall and then have a question that you can to ask about that part. Is there anyone who has not spoken and has questions generically not related to Mr. Gall's presentation? Second time, so go ahead. You're entitled to a second time, but maybe after that we'll invite him to speak.
Okay, quickly. My name is KK Wan. My disappointment is about, as one of the lack of transparency and the secrecy surrounding lots of the affairs conducted. I think related to that secrecy is probably the conflict of interest. For the one board meeting I attended, at the beginning, there was a motion asking all the people, on the table to declare whether they have a conflict of interest on the agenda presented that day. I think, that was defeated by a narrow margin. I think, conflict of interest in some way is the root cause of all this lack of transparency, including the defamation suit, by our former registrar against, another lawyer, and the college agreed to pay for it. So we keep hearing all this rumor about certain people behave this way because they have this connection to certain people within the college. I think, I hope the college in the future will really seriously look at the perception that there's too much conflict of interest that exists within the organization.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So that was a statement.
That's a statement.
Yeah, good. Mr. Gall, I think, how much time will you need? But okay, does it start with the presentation?
Where should I go first of all?
Oh, you go over here. Yeah. So if you can make the presentation, I don't know how much time you need, and then.
My name is Peter Gall. I'm a lawyer here in Vancouver. Some number of months ago, I can't remember how long ago, maybe Don or somebody knows, I was engaged by the college to investigate, report, make recommendations with respect to a matter involving one of your members, one of your registrants, Dr. Rachel Staples. Now, Dr. Rachel Staples had filed a complaint. It had been dealt with. She wasn't satisfied with the result, and the college said, okay, Mr. Gall, could you please come in, look at this, and give recommendations, make recommendations as to how we should deal with this at this stage, which is what I did. And I can go into some detail about my recommendations.
Maybe you can speak to the microphone so people online will hear you too. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
that'd be good.
During the course of that, I became aware of other issues related and possibly unrelated that concerned, there was a mention here of your former registrar, other issues, and I was asked to see, well, essentially make recommendations as to how that other matter may be handled. And I ended up making recommendations with respect to both of those, which were accepted by the board. And the upshot of that was that with respect to Dr. Staples, the college, through the board, has taken steps to, and I think it's fair to say, make amends for certain problems that had arisen with respect to how her complaint was handled by the college. With respect to the registrar, it became apparent to him, and I think the board, that the best course of action would be for him to leave. And then the question was, well, on what terms? And I recommended terms that I thought were fair and reasonable in all of the circumstances of the situation. And I should add and emphasize that in my view, there was not cause in a legal sense to terminate him. So the question was, if he were to depart, either voluntarily or not so voluntarily, the question was, on what basis should he depart and on what terms? And I made, as I said before, recommendations with the 4 recommendations, made recommendations with respect to what I thought was appropriate, what was reasonable, what was fair, from both the perspective of the college and the former registrar. Those terms were agreed to, and the registrar has departed on the terms that I'd recommended. So both of those matters, both with respect to Dr. Staples and your former registrar, have now been resolved, and they were resolved pursuant to the recommendations that I made. Now, I don't know whether I should say anything more and really even get into the recommendations, unless any of you have questions, which I'd be pleased to answer about why I made the recommendations I did with respect. I see somebody nodding their head. You've got a question.
Okay.
Okay.
So, just a moment, one at a time, and if you want to speak, go to the microphone. So there will be questions. There will also be questions from the people online. I just want to manage that to make sure that it's fair to everybody. Go ahead.
Understood. Neil Steinman, Public Board Member. I'm also a practicing lawyer in Vancouver. I'm a member of the current board. I'm rising on a point of order because I fear that if Mr. Gall, who's given the board legal advice, which is privileged, starts to field questions, he's going to be obliged to, wittingly or not, reveal some of the advice he's given to the college. And my view is it would not be appropriate for him to start explaining his recommendations.
Okay, so I'll tell you what. If you notice that it slips over into a place where which you think is compromises, at that point, raise a point of order. You're giving us a caution at this point. I
am, because I know what's going to happen.
Well, if it crosses that boundary, let us know.
Well, Neil's correct. I mean, we have come up to the boundary. Now, there is a privilege that attaches to the legal advice that I've been giving the college. It can be waived. With respect to Dr. Staples, I issued a report that somehow got into the hands of the Globe and Mail, and we took the position that we hadn't waived privilege and they shouldn't comment on it, but they did anyway, and it was out. So with respect to Dr. Staples, there is some, I don't know whether the privilege has already been waived or not. And it's up to the college to determine to what extent they want to waive it and want me to get into that. With respect to Mr. Marburg, I think, I've said all I need to say and should say, and I think, and I want to emphasize once again, there was no cause in a legal sense to terminate Mr. Marburg. And I think that I just want to make that crystal, and that was my view. You know, and I know that there were strong feelings both ways. There was a number of people who supported him strongly. Some people thought that maybe it was time for a change. And so I didn't make a decision. I didn't make a recommendation about whether he should stay or not. I simply acted as an intermediary between Mr. Marburg, through his counsel and through the board, and gave advice with respect to what I thought were fair and reasonable terms for somebody who had been performing this job for a number of years, and on balance, well, and again, it's not for me to comment, I thought had been doing certainly a reasonable job. Now, again, I said this before at a board meeting, and our current registrar maybe should take this into account, because I said it's like hockey coaches. It seems that with people who take on this job as a registrar of a professional body, they have like a lifespan, and then, you know, and there's always going to be controversy, and then at some point, okay, it's time to go. And it probably, well, it was. I mean, I think Mr. Marburg realized that it had come up to that point, and then there was the question of just how you deal fairly, honorably with somebody who'd given good service to the college for a number of years.
Okay, so how about if we hear a few questions? I'm sure
Yeah, that's absolutely, sure.
Are there any online? Maybe we'll start
Sure.
with those. Anything coming online? Nothing? So please line up at the microphone if you have questions. We'll accommodate as many as we can. So, microphone. Any questions to Mr. Gall?
My name's Alan Jaroff. I'm a general dentist here in Vancouver. Has an apology gone out to Rachel Staples yet?
It has. The college, not me, has taken what I think, again, are appropriate steps to apologize to her and to make amends for the way that her matter had been handled. And it's been done in a way that's satisfactory to her. And as far as I know, and I've been dealing with her lawyer, that matter has now been resolved.
Thank you. And the other issue involves the openness and transparency that the college is saying that they have. Why should I find out what's happening in our college through the Globe and Mail? Why shouldn't I be informed of what's happening? For instance, Adrian Dix hiring Harry Clayton in April. Why should I find out about Rachel Staples by reading the newspaper?
I don't even know who Harry Clayton is, so I can't comment about transparency and how you found. But you have to understand, it wasn't. And at the time that report, I'd issued my report. The college, the board, was in the process of considering what to do. So it was not an intentional act that you find out about it through the Globe and Mail. In fact, I can tell you, certainly I was dismayed, I think the board was dismayed, that somebody had, and I don't know for what reason, and I don't know who did it, but disclosed that to the Globe and Mail. That was most unfortunate, and it caused a problem, because here we are in the process of making amends with Dr. Staples, and that comes out in the Globe and Mail. And it wasn't Dr. Staples who did it, and it wasn't to her advantage, and it's not something that she wanted. So I think that was unfortunate that you would learn about it, the world would learn about it, anybody would learn about what really was a confidential matter and should have been kept confidential until the matter was resolved. That was just, I don't know how or why that happened, and I think in the future the college, I don't know what steps you can take to make sure that when you do have confidential information that's being considered by the board, that it not be leaked to the press.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Please go to the microphone if you want to line up. Go ahead. And please let me know if anyone is
Ben again.
having a question online.
It's Ben again. I'll just kind of reiterate something that someone said.
And by the way, you can direct the questions to the officers as
it's
well.
officers.
It's not the only one.
No, I'm looking at all of you. So I'll just start by saying that there's a saying that before I say anything, I first ask myself if it needs to be said. Then I ask myself, do I need to say it? And the third thing I have to ask myself is, does it need to be said right now? And I
take it's yes to all three questions.
Exactly. First one is, what I understand happened was there was a report that was only privy to the people in the board. Is that correct?
I was engaged by the board.
But your report was privy only to the board, right?
It was, yes, it was.
And somehow it got leaked. So that there's a compromise in how that information. Has an investigation been done by the board on who leaked it, how it was leaked, and so this will never happen again?
Okay, so let's direct this one to the board. Any comments?
Thank you, Ben. The leak of that information was most upsetting to the board, and in particular, most upsetting to me, because I'm the spokesperson for the board and I have to answer for that. We have a board meeting tomorrow, which we are going to be dealing with that very same issue. So there is an investigative process that's going to be undertaken tomorrow, as well as we are going to be discussing transparency and what information we're allowed to give out. Now, I can tell you that the situation is still live. We have not completely, to my mind, because I haven't been in touch with you completely, totally in the last little while to find out exactly, has everything been finalized for the settlement with Rachel Staples or Mr. Marburg. So we're coming close to that position where it's completely resolved.
I could just pick up, Don.
Yep.
It's been finalized on both sides. Now, with respect to Dr. Staples, there's a little bit more paperwork, let's put it. But it's been finalized, as I said, to her satisfaction and to the board's satisfaction. So it's just a few little dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's to bring it to completion. But there is a final resolution.
Okay. More?
Just with that in mind, the board in our meeting tomorrow is going to be addressing how much detail and information the board feels comfortable with releasing to the registrants. So more is on the way.
So is a comment needed by any other officers at this point? Okay, anyone else? There's someone else who was waiting to...
Excuse me, can I say something? I just want to clarify one small misconception, is that it wasn't just the board who had access to that report. That report also went to Jerome and his lawyer.
Yeah, well, it did. It's hard for me to believe that Jerome or his lawyer was the source of the leak. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you have more questions, go ahead, line up.
Yeah, my name is KK1, it's me again. I just want to know whether there's a non-disclosure agreement signed by both parties on this settlement, what's similar to what Donald Trump's lawyer signed with Stormy Daniels.
The answer is no. Now, the board, the college, in dealing with this matter, has to respect the privacy interests of the people involved, but it also has an obligation to its members. And then, as I understand from Dawn, it's going to be discussed tomorrow, just what details in striking that balance should be presented and provided to its members. But no, it's not like Stormy Daniels.
Please go to the microphone.
Dr. Larry Cheevers again. Chris, this is a question for you, and it's my observation of the changing parameters that occurs in our profession. Recently, I read an article that something like 15% of dental offices in the States are spas. So I want to introduce a new concept to you. I'm thinking of an IPO, actually, at $20 each for 1 million shares. I want to introduce the Happy Valley Dental Spa. And in that, I'm going to actually accommodate people who want their hair done, like Tony and his friend Maxi will do your hair, revitalize it. And we will take off the spots on your face with our lasers. We will fill in those age marks with our dermal fillers. We will enhance your lips. You can watch your veneers being done in the laboratory. We can have a Brazil cut, and you can have a pedo. Hands and feet, right? So I know this trend is going to increase as we go across the board, because we are expanding our practices. I mean, lasers are out that can actually now remove spots, age spots on your hands. It'll be pretty soon they'll be doing it on your face. So how does the college take into account all of these factors that are going to happen in the near future? Not maybe tomorrow morning, but in 10 years' time, there will be issues coming up in relationship to this kind of treatment that's going to go on in a dental office. Now, by the way, from a legal point of view, you can have two separate businesses, right? Mm-hmm. But they will actually be occurring under the umbrella of a dentist or a dental office. Happy Valley Dental Spa in Commercial Drive, no problems. It's going to open up in 5 years' time. Ladies, come get your hair done, get everything done, pedicure and manicure. So how are you going to deal with something like this, Chris? What's the college attitude towards dental spas?
Okay, so that question is not related to the same subject, right?
Well, maybe I am finished, yeah.
Maybe he is.
Yeah, maybe I am.
Maybe. Let's
Although,
hear
by the way, from a consumer's point of view, I think that sounds great.
Okay, so why don't you answer, if you have an answer to that?
Yeah, Harry, Larry, thank you for changing the subject, I think. And Peter, I don't want to waste your time. So, Larry, can we put that in advance until we've finished with Peter, and then I'm happy to answer.
We can certainly do that. Any other questions directly to this matter of Staples Marburg? Let's hear from people who haven't. Is there anyone who has not spoken yet on that one? Don't ask a question about that one. And is there anyone online? Any question online? Nope. Okay, go ahead.
Another question regarding, it's Mr. Gall,
Peter,
right?
Peter.
Peter, was you had said that a decision was made by the previous board regarding the case of Dr. Staples accusing...
You know, I was careful not to say, to attribute any blame to anybody in the handling of it. So,
no, but what you did say that you had to make amends. Amends implies that there was something wrong that was done.
Yes.
So I want to know, what did you I didn't read your report, and I never had access to it, but were you critical of the decision, which is fine, those decisions can be appealed, and I agree that, or were you critical of the process? And if you were critical of the process or the decision, are you allowed to say what it was? Is it okay to say what it was about the process or the decision that you were critical of?
I'm going to speak generally, and it really was about the process, and it doesn't lay, and the number of people that were involved in the process. There was one board, new board comes in, there's administrative staff, and really, and I guess if a lesson is to be taken, it would be that there should have been, how to describe it, a little bit more continuity in the process to make sure that things didn't get overlooked with respect. Now, this was an unusual matter. It was not the type of complaint that I'm familiar with to professional regulatory bodies from a member. So it's not as if it fit nicely or neatly or comfortably in your existing processes. So, and I did not find fault on the part of any one person or criticize any particular decision. But the upshot of what happened was that Dr. Staples' complaint, unfortunately, was not dealt with in the way it should have been. And I'm sure lessons have been learned
Okay.
Well, it just that you know, it just, how should I put this? Because I want to speak generally. That people didn't really realize or understand where the matter sat and that nothing was being done to deal with it. And so it went on too long and ended up to the disadvantage of Dr. Staples. You know, it's just oversight, and you know, the board's changing, staff, you know, it just fell between, it really was a question of that. It was nothing intentional, advertent, malicious, and I certainly didn't find that any particular individual or individuals were at fault.
Okay, so any comment from the board on this one? What was your question? Okay.
Well, hearing there's no legally binding non-disclosure, you know, agreement between the two parties. So the board is going to meet tomorrow. I strongly urge if the board can waive this, you know, right to secrecy, and then let all the information, including, you know, I think the report with 4 recommendations to be known, you know, publicly, rather than we finding out from Globe and Mail again.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any more questions to? Okay. So thank you. I think you're.
You know, I'll just end on this. I like the. Thank you. I like this idea. And by the way, I've had some involvement, both acting for other regulatory bodies, but I did have a case with the pharmacists where they banned loyalty points, which are to the advantage of the consumer. This is my plea in here. I think that regulatory bodies should always be consumer-oriented in the approach they take. So I'm going to leave on that note. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah. And what about the Happy Valley, Dr. Hager, about the Happy Valley question?
Yeah, Larry, I'm happy to get back to your question and points. As to trends, I would ask you to speak to Ben. He can probably tell you exactly where this is going in the next 10 years.
No, I'm serious. I was on a cruise recently, and you couldn't get into any of the spas.
Yep.
Okay.
So what's happening is it's the biggest growth industry, the hotel industry. Spas are. So, you know, it's grab onto it, guys. I mean, ladies want their hair done, they want manicures, pedicures. What's wrong with the dental office?
Okay.
Sure, well, I'll speak to that if you'd like. The box of public interest is a big one. And there are many, many aspects of patient care in there that concern us all, access to care being one of them. The box that the college works within that is related to the HPA is a much smaller box, and that's our space. That's where we are. The Health Professions Act, that legislation informs the regulation, and the dentist regulation very clearly lays out the scope of practice of dentistry, and it's dentistry, and that dentistry is defined by the restricted activities that are there, and those are the ones that we regulate, and that's where we regulate. So beyond that small box of the Health Professions Act, we can certainly help facilitate, but that's not within our mandate. And so I would say that a dentist has to maintain their professionalism. That's an obligation that they have and an undertaking they take. But how they want to run their practice, as long as it's in compliance with the Health Professions Act and they are not doing anything that is outside the scope of their practice, we're fine with that. We're having a discussion right now, and if you were at the ethics panel at the PDC in March, they talked a little bit about patient versus client and what are those definitions, and the fact that definition is changing, and patients want to be clients, and they want their care done in collaboration with their input in it. Patients, I think, very specifically could be defined as a person waiting for or having active treatment. If you have a coffee machine in your office for your patients, they're probably clients. And so I think I'd probably leave it there, but really how you set your business up and how you want to run it, as long as it's compliant with the legislation and the regulation, we're fine.
Okay. Okay. Is it, Is there anyone calling online? Any question from online? None? Go ahead. Dr. Bassi. Go ahead.
Richard Bussey, registrant and soon to be joining the board, and still think I'm looking forward to the experience. Just a quick question. I don't think, just because of time, that we didn't answer the question regarding the current governance model that the board is currently utilizing. And Chris and I had a discussion recently about we're looking at, and Mr. Caton will be looking at our governance model. But what is the current, are we under Carver? Where are we at now with respect to the style of governance that the college currently functions under? Thank you.
I can answer that. We had a meeting with Liz Watson, who was the construct chair of our current governance manual. And when I came on board as president, one of the things that I noticed as a general feeling in the board was that there seemed to be a grasp of approaching the governance more in the Carver model. And in talking to Liz Watson, the governance manual that we use is not in the Carver model at all. It gives the board more responsibility, more authority, and more oversight than the Carver model. So the current governance manual, in talking to Liz Watson, and in conjunction with my discussion with Susan Chow, Dr. Chow, who is the chair of the governance committee, we need to address some changes in the governance committee, which your role as a new board member will be involved with, on two parts. One is that on a broad scale, we're looking at changes in Bylaw 2. And Bylaw 2 is composition of the board and how the board is structured. And there's a lot of aspects of that that are written up in our current governance manual, which has not been changed since 2012 and should be reviewed every couple of years. So it's a long-standing rewrite. The big rewrite is going to be to coordinate that with Bylaw 2 changes. Bylaw 2, by the way, is board composition, how the election process happens, how do we elect, or how do we position the person as president or chair of the board. The thing that became really obvious was that there is shortcomings in the current governance manual, which leaves some question as to how the board is supposed to be responding. That's outside of the bylaws changes. And so one of the tasks that I think that you're going to have to address as a new board is to sit down and look at situations where a quick rewrite or an addendum to the governance manual will end up helping the board move forward in the proper direction. And so that's something that I think needs to be addressed fairly soon in your term of office. The Bylaw 2 change is a bigger rewrite of everything, or the bylaw rewrite is a bigger change in everything, but that's something that's automatically going to be coming down the pipeline. So did that answer your question? Okay.
Seeing no one at there is someone? No.
I think we're at the end of our questions. I'm Peter Lobb. I will be the president in less than 14 days. So on behalf of the profession and the registrants, we all know that we've come through a difficult period, and we're all in this game together, the public and the board that represents us. And in this room are many board members who have served and will serve, and committee members, our elected officers, our acting registrar. We want to thank you for your service, your time, your dedication. I know over the past months the toll it's taken on all of you. We make decisions in the best interests and on the information we have. It will be questioned, it will be challenged, and that's the beauty of a democracy. So on behalf of the registrants, behalf of all of the people that you work towards, thank you to you, the officers, and the board, and the committee members for your service this past year.
Thank you, Peter.
I pass it back to the president because it seems they.
As we are now concluding the business session of the AGM, and with warm fuzzies from Peter, thank you, Peter, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.